We're going to start in just about 2 minutes. We'll let everybody have a chance to join us, and we'll get started in just about 2 minutes over the hour. Thanks to those that are joining. We're going to get started in just about 2 minutes. Just about 2 minutes over the hour. Thanks to those that are just joining. We're going to get started in just about 1 minute. Thanks for those that are joining. We're going to get started in just a couple of seconds. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for joining us on today's webinar. We are excited to get going. We're going to spend about 30 minutes today discussing a handful of really important topics, predictions in particular for this calendar year, 2023. We're going to focus our discussion around customer data, data privacy, and advertising trends, three really timely and important topics. And we have two really important guests that I'm going to get to in just a moment with their introductions before we get into the discussion. A couple of ground rules for today. Open discussion, which means that as the audience who is participating with us live, you have the opportunity to ask questions, drop them into the Q&A. When you ask questions, I'll have a chance as the moderator to look at them and ask those questions live. So please do feel free to participate, ask questions in the Q&A box in Zoom, and I'll make sure that we get them directly to our two guests. But let's start off today's discussion with a little bit of a preamble. Starting about 3.5 weeks ago, Lytics commissioned a survey. We did it with a company called Sapio Research. And we did it just this month because we thought it would be important to better understand, amidst what I'd call a bunch of turmoil at the beginning of 23, how businesses would be spending all of our time and our variable budgets. And I'd have to say that I was pretty shocked about the results. James and I have talked about this a little bit. Christine and I have talked about this a little bit. The survey showed that the technology spending in businesses kind of writ large was actually going to increase this year. And it was going to increase not just with technology spending, but also with ad dollars. And that's in spite of the fact that we are seeing a tremendous amount of turmoil and uncertainty in the public markets, and certainly in the news. In this research that we did, in fact, only around 10% of businesses said that they were going to be pausing or actually contracting spending. When we dug a little bit deeper into the research, a couple of trends emerged that I thought would be important to call out as we jump into the discussion today. The first is that, we did see quite a bit of what I would consider to be dramatic inflationary pressures in 2022, and maybe they're easing a bit, but they're definitely still present as we look at the beginning of this calendar year. And they've made businesses, ours included, a little bit more conscientious about how we spend our money. So marketing oftentimes is one of the more effective ways for brands to maintain a presence in the hearts and minds of existing customers. And it's also a really good way for businesses to attract new customers. But it's an area where we want to be conscientious about how we utilize dollars. So a big trend that is important that is emerging in this research that we're going to spend some time about today is how we utilize variable dollars. Like what's going on in the advertising world? The second trend that emerged is that businesses really learned a lot through a pretty significant event that we've all dealt with over the course of the last few years, and that's the COVID pandemic. It was a precautionary tale for businesses that are thinking about how to respond to the recession that we're currently dealing with. Many brands hit the pause button on marketing activities and infrastructure spending during the pandemic, and they only started to pick back up spending and investments when it was at a point where it was frankly too late and they had overcorrected. So there's this precautionary tale that showed up in the research that was done that basically said, hey, we have to be very conscientious about not overcorrecting too much, but to be very smart about thinking through our investment. So that's another topic that we're going to be digging into in quite a bit more detail today. So when we think about these trends, one of the discussions that we're going to dig into quite a bit is thinking about channel strategy. That's top of mind for a lot of businesses today. Nearly all marketers, as I mentioned before, all businesses plan to invest this year in 2023. And some of these survey takeaways that I think are important that are going to lead into this discussion look like the following. Here's some stats that I think are interesting. Almost 60% of businesses, and marketers in particular, plan to update their data infrastructure in 2023. It's kind of a wild number. More than half, almost 60% of marketers in businesses plan to update their data infrastructure in 2023. It's kind of a retrenchment to some extent. Nearly 60% of businesses and marketers plan to invest in data, software, and tools in 2023. So thematically, a really critical call out. We're starting 2023. We know that we've learned a lot from the pandemic, precautionary tale for businesses to not overcorrect. However, there's a big mind's eye towards, I need to be smart about setting up my business with data and infrastructure, software and tools to start 2023. More than 45% of businesses plan to hire data talent, and more than 45% of businesses plan to increase privacy compliance in 2023. Some really interesting trends to kick off our discussion today around predictions for customer data, data privacy, and advertising trends. But today isn't just about the research that we did here at Lytics. It's really about our two guests today that are really the star of the show. So let me introduce the two of them to you. Let's start first with Christine Grammier. Christine is the head of LiveRamp's Commercial Innovation Lab, where she leads a cross-functional team to support customers through a fast-paced validation, seeking the best path to value in new product releases. Christine's a marketing analytics pioneer who understands consumer needs and helps the world's largest brands appeal to them. She's launched her career executing the first online and offline ads data connections in 2003, when the Internet Advertising Bureau was striving to find evidence that the internet advertising could actually drive in-store sales. I was around at that time, and I can tell you that the work that Christine did was super impactful. She was topped off again in 2011 when the Mobile Marketing Association struggled to connect mobile devices to offline sales for conversions. She's really been one of the pioneers in trying to find the connection between some of the most critical industries in the world and the internet, and tying kind of the conversions between those two things together. She's a wonderful person. I've had a chance to work with her for the last few years. We're super lucky to have her here today and the body of experience that she's had. So Christine, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you.
Thank you, Jascha. Looking forward to the conversation.
In addition to Christine, we're super excited to have James McDermott here today. James is a serial entrepreneur, a multi-time founder. He's a lawyer by training, a privacy expert with that, a deep, deep history buff, a proud father of 3 amazing children. He also happens to be the CEO and co-founder of Lytics. He's been working in the data analytics space for over the last 20 years. I've had an opportunity to work with him across multiple different organizations. And oftentimes, many people credit him with coining the term CDP, that is the framing for the customer data platform space. So James is going to bring a lot of experience in kind of referencing what we think about when we frame the importance of privacy and security in the investments that are going to be making in 2023. So James, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks, Jascha. Christine, super excited for the conversation.
Well, let's jump right into it. But I think the research is an interesting frame for us to start the discussion with, because I was quite frankly shocked. I really thought that we would have seen, especially because the research was done over the course of the last few weeks, that there would be a lot more tentativeness in projected spending. Like, I would have assumed that we would have heard out of the gate, we're just not going to be spending a lot, or we're going to be decreasing spending, at least in the first half of this year. But instead, we saw pretty significant increases in spend being predicted by nearly every business that we interviewed. So my question starts first to you, Christine. Like, how do you see marketing spend shifting in 2023? We saw a lot of changes in 2022, but what are the changes that you expect to see in 2023, knowing that there's a prediction that we're going to see an increase?
Yeah. So I think that every business is likely making their trade-offs. And as you said earlier in the opening, Jascha, the COVID timeframe taught people that just because you have to cut somewhere doesn't mean that you should cut in marketing, in media, that it's likely the growth engine. You can't slice it off. So I think that we see our customers, and definitely the conversations I have with marketers every day, we see them doing everything they can to preserve the action, the dollars that they can have in market. But I will say, inevitably, we've been through these cycles before. They tend to focus on the dollars that they can point to being highly accountable, or they can see the direct response outcomes of those dollars. I do expect us to see less of the brand building investments that we may have historically seen at times when everyone's a little bit more flush. I think maybe the last thing that is a trend I love, and I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit more, is actually that a lot of the TV dollars are becoming more accountable now through the way that TV, the technology that powers TV is all more addressable, so we can measure those conversions. So I think there were times when, in a moment like this, you would go really close to DR search investments where you could see the direct line to business outcomes. It's exciting to be in a time where that includes more and more channels that have connection to outcomes. So that's my quick take.
I appreciate that a lot. James, I want to keep going in the same direction with you. So let's dig a little bit deeper. Are there any channels in particular that you think are going to benefit this year more than others?
Yeah, I think in general, I echo, Christine's comments. We're really at an inflection point. I think the research shows that. And I think companies are trying to figure out how can we be more efficient, with our ad spend. And a big part of that is, how do we start to think about how we can leverage our data, which is one of our most leverageable assets, right? How do we use more of our first party data to be more effective in new channels? And so I think one of the most exciting channels for advertisers that we're talking to and our customers is YouTube. As an example, I think everybody's thinking about how do we reach kind of the connected consumer, or CTV, and YouTube has 2 billion consumers on that platform. And so a lot of the brands that we're working with are thinking about, can we use our first party data? Can we reach consumers in new and interesting places, especially in video and streaming? And so I think YouTube's a really interesting place for companies to start thinking about as a new and opportunity-rich channel.
I'm with you on YouTube. Christine, I'm curious, kind of in that same vein with video, like, do you see with the customers that you work with any uptick with TikTok in particular? Is there a relationship between TikTok and YouTube?
Well, I would say our all stemming from that first party data. In many cases, our customers are looking to go where their consumers are. And so as the time shifts there, we definitely see our customers sorting it out. I think that some of these platforms come with a lot of baggage that you have to really sort your way through. We had a lot of customers who have had pivotal changes in how they think about Twitter in the last couple of months. But we see a lot of interest in leaning, going where, especially the younger consumers, where younger consumers are located and spending their time. So yes, for sure on TikTok. And the exciting thing that we see with TikTok is that they're leaning back into marketers to actually support measurement and ROI outcomes. So they're not resisting that need to also prove the investments there are working.
That makes sense. I'm kind of generically asking these questions, which means that I'm not digging into whether we're thinking about a go-to-market that's focused on B2B or B2C. So as a B2C marketer or a B2B marketer, we may or may not be thinking about places like TikTok or places like YouTube. However, we're seeing channels like TikTok, YouTube, and even LinkedIn play a bigger and bigger role in all of our lives. Do you see maybe a confluence of all of these channels together, or are they becoming maybe less important in the go-to-market from a B2B or B2C marketer? Just less distinction. Maybe that's the way that I should be asking the question. Does it matter anymore if you're a B2C or a B2B marketer? Should you be looking across all of the different channels? Should I be looking at LinkedIn if I'm a B2C marketer?
Yeah, we help so many brands cross that chasm with our tools every day. So whether they are in, so many brands have both have both languages that they're speaking for different reasons. So whether you're talking about AT&T, where there's a B2B message and there's a B2C message, or you're talking about, companies in one or the other, all of this technology, all these platforms, it's really applicable in both places. And I will say, to give the B2B marketers, so many of I'll call them like kind of new B2B marketing solutions are being built in such a savvy way when it comes to infrastructure. They're really thinking about the most innovative ways to store their data, manage their data, measure that. I think in some cases we see B2B actually leaping ahead and doing things in a more creative and innovative way.
Oh, that's pretty fascinating. James, I know you work with a lot of retailers. Curious if you can jump in there as well.
Yeah, Christine kind of nailed it, but it's, companies are trying to reach prospective buyers with more precision. And so I think kind of what's happening is media channels and the platforms have figured out, well, it's really important for us to be able to open up our network so that companies can take their first-party data and onboard it directly to these channels and networks so that they can reach these prospective buyers. And so I think what it's done is it's sort of democratized how we think about these channels. So a B2B company can reach the right people, not just on LinkedIn, but also on these other ad networks. And I think it's also opened up a lot of interesting opportunities around, lookalike modeling. And so can we start to use our first-party data to identify and build lookalikes on, Meta or Google or YouTube or LinkedIn, and then, essentially kind of find additional prospective buyers that look like our best customers or look like these buyers. And so the whole media landscape, I think, has changed pretty dramatically. Some of that because of, third-party cookies and less ability for advertisers to kind of use that third-party data to be targeted. And I think, coming back to the kind of data infrastructure investment that you're seeing we're seeing in the study, it's just this desire to really, invest in our customer data so that we can be more precise and more effective.
James, I don't want to be presumptive with anyone that's listening in today. You mentioned something really important, so I want to dig into it a little bit more and ask you to describe it in a little bit more detail. So you mentioned first-party data and onboarding first-party data. Can you describe maybe a bit more descriptively what you mean by that? So if I'm a business that's listening in today and you say, hey, a trend is using your first-party data, that asset, and using it to be more targeted in growing your reach, can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the simplest terms, and Christine and LiveRamp, obviously, they've been at the forefront of kind of onboarding for a long time, but it's really, you have a CRM record, right? You have somebody who's in your CRM and you want to be able to reach them with an ad. How do you essentially take that record and then onboard it to an ad network so you can communicate, reach, target, advertise to that individual? What's happened is, that previously was you would upload a CSV list, and then the ad network would find that match, or you could use an onboarder like LiveRamp to be able to translate a CRM record into a cookie ID, and then you could onboard that directly. What's happening right now, kind of in this moment, is all of the ad platforms are recognizing brands have a rich first-party data set that might be CRM, but it also might be prospects. There's a whole kind of new set of data, and brands want to be able to create audiences with their own data and onboard that directly to these networks. And so that's what the kind of first-party data onboarding strategy looks like. And in addition to that, not just for kind of remarketing or kind of retargeting, brands are really thinking about how do we also take a first-party seed list, an audience of people that we have a relationship with, and then send that to the ad network and then have them build a lookalike model so we can find more people that look like that. So for reach, that's become a really important strategy. And I think the foundation of all of that is building, a consumer data set or a customer data set that you have access to, that you can use to basically support these different strategies.
That's super helpful. I appreciate that. It made me think of a set of press releases that I've seen over the course of the last, call it 4 or 5 months, and as recent as CES, where the trade desk introduced like a product that they call Galileo, or maybe a package that they call Galileo. So Christine, I'm going to ask this to you because I think this is definitely in your wheelhouse. So James, as you're talking about this idea of, as a business, kind of maximizing this consumer data set asset and being able to make it available, Christine, we've been hearing lots and lots about everybody from the trade desk to LinkedIn to Meta to everyone introducing a clean room where, as a business, you can start to upload your first party data list. One, check my facts there. Is that actually happening? And two, can you talk about this trend of the clean room being introduced by DSPs? And then let's jump into a conversation about clean rooms and really what they are and why they're important.
Yeah, definitely. So the concept of a clean room is really is the concept of being able to bring two data sets together. I'll start with definitions, and then we'll go on from there. So it's to bring two data sets together without actually having to give them to each other. So think of two different data owners. We'll use the example of a press release that we released at CES, which is Albertsons and Pinterest. So you take that example, both have tremendous first-party data where consumers have given them consent and opted in, and they have a lot of mutually beneficial outcomes. Like the key part of leveraging a clean room is that the two parties really have to be seeking a mutually beneficial outcome. Otherwise, it won't last and it's not helpful. So those two parties definitely have win-wins on both sides of bringing their data together. To overlap it for insights like, aha, this person really is looking up a ton of recipes for mac and cheese. I bet that Albertsons could give some really specific offers to consumers in store about mac and cheese and help craft in their progress. And I bet that Pinterest could also take some of that data from Albertsons and make sure they're doing some great targeting across their inventory. The data infrastructure that allows this sharing is what we call clean rooms. And really it's in the first inning or maybe the second inning of really watching the ecosystem derive value from it. We do see DSPs coming to the table and starting to participate in them. I would say that really where we see the most adoption is in two places. Premium publishers. So historically, like TV publishers, think about Disney. They have reams and reams and reams of information about my family, I can promise. Every time we visited Disneyland, all of the different sports we watch on ABC, they have tons of information about me. And so these premium TV publishers that are also also companies that cover a lot of different consumer touch points have amazing consumer assets. Social, we talked a little bit about TikTok, we talked about Pinterest. They really have, they're going to sell, they want to sell media in a direct way. They're going to avoid programmatic channels. They want to sell to advertisers in a direct way. And they want to give advertisers the opportunity to overlap data and really look deeply at the insights of their overlaps and then activate. So once you find those great overlaps, you can send a list of customer IDs. The way we work is turning it into a pseudonymous identifier so that it is completely protected and there can't be any data leakage. Other people are doing these kinds of connections on a hashed email We think it's pretty risky, but we do think that the industry will evolve quickly. And so the clean rooms are the ability to overlap, have control, maintain control, and activate together, more or less. We really lean into a permission-based structure, so that the clean room should really have a lot of controls that allow different users to do different things, and only let data leave under very specific circumstances to approved destinations by both parties, and or for specific views and queries that both parties approve. So, oh, I forgot, retail media is the other place that's growing really quickly. So you'll, I'm sure, hear more and more about them as we go. Early stages, and like my headline is really try to focus on mutual benefit. Like when it's a one-sided deal and one party is going to derive a lot more benefit than the other, they usually don't work out in scale.
I've got to tell you that the volume of discussion around clean rooms does not seem to be slowing down, and to be able to dive into it and be succinct about it is super helpful. So thank you. I appreciate it. You know, this idea of data control, to be able to kind of purposefully share information back and forth opens up kind of, I'm going to call it a can of worms that maybe, James, you can help us kind of put them back into a spot that they need to be or should be. There's maybe a broader space that this idea of data control sits within that I think is probably really important for us all to be thinking about. You know, as we consider the data that we have access into, the controls that we need to have inside of an organization around data, like how should we be thinking about as a business, well, really the checks and balances around our data strategy in 23 moving forward? I know there's been a lot of changes that have been introduced with GDPR and Scrum 2, and I know a lot of new states are getting involved in 23 in the US in particular. So what do we need to be thinking about in 23 to make sure that we're not just kind of participating, but ahead of the game, protecting consumers' data?
That's a big topic. So I think, you know, number one, we've been talking about first party data. And so to be clear, that's like consent based. So kind of at the core of GDPR and just all of the, really the kind of privacy changes, it's, putting more control into the consumer's hands so that there's transparency, that the data is being collected in a specific way under certain kind of rules. And I think that, GDPR and what's happening in the US and, what's happening globally is every country is just thinking about, call it data sovereignty, but it's, how do we protect our citizens? How do we protect our consumers? For companies, I think what that has meant is a pretty big rethink in terms of how do we collect data? How do we manage data? How do we store data? How do we process it and make sure that it's done in a way that safeguards, consumers' privacy rights? And so a few things that we've seen that I think have just really changed dramatically, especially in the last 6 months, 12 months. It's number one, I think every company, we were talking about at the top, they want to do more with data and they want to be more effective in their spend and how they communicate, but they know that they have to do it the right way. And so as they're thinking about this, we'll call it digital transformation strategy, they're all thinking, number one, we need to align our digital transformation strategy around a cloud provider, because we don't want to have multiple cloud providers with multiple data strategies. So we want to align our digital transformation strategy with our cloud strategy, with our data strategy, and with our privacy strategy. And so all of these data elements really mean that companies are starting to first think, what's the right privacy-centric approach? And Christine's talking about one that I think has really become, top of mind for companies, which is how do we create a privacy-centric way to share in a more granular way on a permission basis data that we have with other companies to create value. I think that's a big topic. Two, how do we make sure that we're meeting all of the data residency requirements that are emergent now? Whether that's in Germany, like the German government wants to protect German citizens. And so that means you have to collect data, process data, manage data, store data in Germany on German residents. And so does your data platform and your CDP, because we're in the CDP space, do they reflect that requirement? And then the last piece, I think, and we're hearing this I would say more and more, and I think this is a really important trend, is companies are thinking about, we want it to be a customer managed environment. And what I mean by that is the brand or the advertiser or the publisher or whoever it is, they want to have the data and the infrastructure behind their firewall. So as a CDP, we need to be able to support these global enterprises or highly regulated industries like financial services when they're thinking like privacy first. How do we do this in a secure, privacy-centric way? Well, we need to collect and manage all of this data behind our firewall. So there's a lot of kind of additional, I would say, complexity around how companies can start to embrace this data first strategy, because it really needs to be privacy first. And a lot of changes are happening there, but one of the primary use cases for companies that do set up a large data set and they want to do secure privacy-centric sharing is a clean room. And so being able to support that and facilitate that sharing can be super powerful. And I think it's just part of our new environment and the way that the companies are restricted in terms of how they manage data.
It's I think a super important and heady topic for us to be digging into. We're, if you can believe it, right at the end of our time here together over the course of the last half hour.
We were just getting started, Jascha.
We are just getting started. I do want to end on kind of one thing for both of you. I'm going to ask two questions. One of them is going to be you giving your recommendation to brands in 2023. But before that, I want to ask one question because you hit on something earlier on. I know it's a hot topic, so I want to bring it back up. But I want to tease the final question. So the final question for both of you is going to be, please give to our audience your one recommendation for brands in 2023 to be more efficient and effective. So that's the question for both of you. But before we get there, because both of you mentioned this, and I want to pull it back out, it's not directly related to data in the last part of the conversation or clean rooms. I do want to get both of your take on the importance of connected TV. Because both of you talked about connected TV. It seems to be growing in importance. We hear about it nearly daily from prospects, from customers, kind of it's in the zeitgeist, but I want to hear about why it's so important and why you think there's so much discussion around it. And then we're going to jump into your one recommendation. But Christine, let's start with you. Why is connected TV such an important and growing topic right now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to get the quote right. The TV advertising industry is giant globally. And we spend a lot of time in entertainment as consumers there. And really, it is undergoing a giant transformation right now. So it was all technically delivered the way many of us here probably grew up watching TV. You had, your channels that came over your cable, and the concept of a smart TV seemed like very, very far away. Connected TVs, as it's actually suggested there in your setup, are just changing the way that advertising can be delivered on that TV. So just bringing a whole nother level of targetability and then measurability. So that change, I believe, is really is what's drawing all the attention. Tons of opportunity to make it more effective. So all that huge budget you were spending now, like tons of opportunity to make it work harder for you.
I really appreciate that, Christine. James, I'm going to switch up a little bit. We've got a live question for you, and this is about CDPs. So Milai asks the following question. James, what do you think about commingling B2B and B2C data and the new wave of CDPs that advertise supporting both? So the question's about, what do you think about commingling B2B and B2C data? Yeah,
I think if I was interpreting that question, in the B2B construct, essentially you have kind of a duality of data models. You have your customers and prospects, which is kind of at an individual level, and then you have companies. And so I think it's really important if you're in B2B, your marketing strategy could be aligned around individuals that work at a specific company or companies that you're targeting. And so I think you need to be able to have a data model that enables you to support both of those data types so that you can advertise, run an ABM program that's just targeted directly at one type of company, Or, if you've got a whole bunch of people that have signed up through product-led growth and you're trying to nurture them to a specific outcome, you're able to reach and communicate with those specific individuals, at scale. And so in the B2C construct, it's a little simpler because you don't really have the concept of a company. It's really about consumers. And so you're just trying to reach consumers who would be interested in buying your products. You don't have kind of those two layers. But I think a lot of companies and certainly CDPs are able to support both of those models. And I would say in B2B, most or many software companies in particular embrace both of those models because they're communicating directly to individual users that are buying their products and then also to accounts. But both of those strategies are significantly improved the more you know about the company and the more you know about those individuals, and you can inform your marketing efforts with some context that's relevant. So
ooh, I have a pile on here that I think is helpful. So I'm gonna add to your layer there. We actually have a construct when we're looking at consumer level data, that's the household. And we actually find that this concept of building into the data model, these aggregations, not only for household, but also for business, is critical. And really, if you're managing your data right, you have the opportunity to find Christine at Gmail and Christine at LiveRamp, and unify them to the right person. So if you're wondering if you should do it out there, go for it. It's all upside.
Hear, hear. Christine, let's stay with you. Your one recommendation for brands in 2023 to be more efficient and effective.
Yeah. We were teasing at this through some of our commentary early on, but I think the thing that I really try to help our customers understand is that if you're in marketing, or in ad tech or in advertising, you want to make friends with your data science, data engineer, IT partners as quickly as possible. I think sometimes the groups have a tendency to say, I'm gonna like maybe leave them out. This is gonna be an advertising or a marketing decision because it's in my channel, it's in my lane, and we're gonna go do what we want with technology or data. And sometimes on the other side, IT, data engineers, data science, like these are data decisions. I don't want to spend time hearing all about your advertising drama. And I just what we see is that in the long run, having those relationships strong and foundational and in structures that optimize them working together, it pays back so much. You're not rebuilding technology, you're not having dissatisfied internal stakeholders. So lean in and do it. It might take extra time, might slow down decision making, but it pays back 10 times over in the long run.
Love it. Thank you. I appreciate that. James, your one recommendation for brands in 2023 to be more efficient and effective.
Well, I think I kind of mentioned it earlier, but I'll just double down on it because I hear this more and more, and I think it makes a lot of sense, which is as you're thinking about your kind of global or just your data strategy, think deeply about data gravity and where you want that data to be and how you want to use it. I think for the most part, the companies that we see being more successful, like I said, they've kind of aligned their digital transformation strategy with their cloud data provider. And I will say, we're seeing a lot of companies as they're starting to think about data being the most important, most valuable element of their cloud strategy. And so they're migrating, maybe I think we see it maybe more than most, but we're seeing companies start to rethinking and really move towards Google Cloud because they're the most powerful, best data company in the world. And so that data layer, and then how you think about your CDP and making all of these kind of components fit together. And I think you hear a lot about composability in like the CDP market and other markets, which just means you have a modular kind of product strategy, but it also fits with, do you fit into this cloud ecosystem? Are you a service that ensures that data is staying within your four walls? And that helps your privacy officer, that helps your data teams, that helps your engineering teams. You can move faster, you can build faster. I think companies today they're starting with data, they're building out data sets, and then they want to use it for marketing or for communications. but then they also want to innovate on new products. They want to do data sharing in clean rooms. They want to leverage their data. They're starting to look around the bend and think more strategically about this data asset. And I think your cloud provider and your CDP, those things need to be kind of truly aligned. So that would be my recommendation, to think about that. And the last piece is, all of these roads lead to you as a brand having more control, having more ownership of the data. I think the days of kind of putting all of your data into some other SaaS provider that's off on another cloud, I think that, especially with data privacy and all the regulations that have come to the front here post GDPR and Schrems 2, it's incumbent on brands to really think about, how do we control, how do we manage, and how do we do that in the most efficient and effective way.
Christine, James, predictions are never easy. The two of you navigated through this discussion with a ton of grace, with a tremendous amount of insights. I appreciated it. I know that our listeners appreciated it as well. A couple of really critical threads that both of you pulled on that I think are important to reframe back out. Really, you both hit on here, right? Accountability and control. Right. Starting out at the very beginning, I found it pretty fascinating that we hear from a lot of businesses at the start of this year that they're going to continue to spend a lot this year, in spite of the lack of predictability that we have and how the remainder of this year is going to go into 24. Christine, you started us right off at the beginning, really laying down what is going to be important for everybody to continue to think about. And that's that all of our investments moving through this year have to have a mind's eye towards accountability. It's an important trend that's going to drive all of our investments moving forward. And it's quite frankly, needs to be central to our channel strategy, where we're going to be spending our times. I think for the first time, I now have good clarity on how to be thinking about the control that I need to have around my data and my investment in clean rooms, being very clear about my relationship into premium publishers and to social and into retail media in particular. So thank you for helping us understand accountability, its relationship in data control in the clean rooms. And James, as we think about data as a core asset, right, understanding how we can align our cloud strategy into our data strategy, into our consumer data strategy, and ultimately using our consumer data strategy as a core asset in the business is a really foundational element in creating accountability in the business and really strengthen our infrastructure through 2023. I think a really important trend as well. I appreciate both of your time. Thank you for sharing your intellect. Thank you for sharing all of your thoughts and your predictions this year. I appreciate everybody joining us on today's webinar.
Thank you guys so much for having me.